Welcome to today's webinar on data literacy and out-of-school time. I'm Sandra Ferricks. I'm one of the STEM specialists with Nebraska 4-H and part of the Click to Science and Click to Computer Science team. We're happy to have you join us today, and please do introduce yourself in the chat. Most people have done that. My preferred pronouns are she and her. I'm joining from Lincoln, Nebraska today, and I am really looking forward to talking more about data literacy. This is something kind of new to me, but I think it's going to be really important moving forward in our future. My co-host today is Dr. Stanke. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Sandra. Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Stanke, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm also joining you from Lincoln, Nebraska today. I'm an extension assistant professor in 4-H youth development and statistics here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I've had the opportunity to work with the CLIC team on a few projects, and I'm really happy to be joining you for our discussion in data literacy today.
Thanks, Kimberly. Anne is also going to be helping us today. Anne, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Anne O'Connor, and I'm the project manager for the Click to Science, Click to Computer Science, and Click to Engineering projects. And so I am not presenting. I'm just working on the technical backside.
So if you do have any technical problems, you can chat with Anne, or in the chat is going to be the easiest way to reach her. Unless you can't get in, then let us know via email, I guess. We're happy to have you here, and we want to talk about the what, why, and how of bringing data literacy into out-of-school time. Data literacy is a really new area for out-of-school time programs, after-school programs, libraries. We see this emerging in a lot of different areas in the out-of-school time world, and we think that it's going to continue to be important. We're going to be adding a section to the Click to Computer Science website that focuses on data literacy in the next few months, and part of our motivation for doing this webinar today is to talk to you about what we're thinking around data literacy and to hear from you about what you're thinking, get your input on how we can support programs in this area. The picture here is from some filming that we did just a couple weeks ago to start capturing what data literacy looks like in out-of-school time. So these videos will be, they're in production now. It usually takes us about 3 months to get from filming to having videos on the website. So we're expecting to get those posted sometime in February. They're going to be our first opportunity to kind of see what this looks like in out-of-school time. We had a great time with this group of kids doing some filming, and you'll see a couple more images of them as we're trying to figure out what this actually looks like in practice. And again, I want to invite you to use the chat. Please put questions, ideas that occur to you as we're going in the chat. I don't want you to forget a good question or a comment. You're also welcome to interrupt us as we're talking. We want this to be an informal conversation. We're going to have times where we stop and ask for your input. But if you've got a question as we're presenting, we're also happy to interrupt a thought and really dig into some ideas. That's how we're really going to learn from what we're doing today. And I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly to start with helping us understand what is data literacy. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thanks, Sandra. So data literacy is this really sort of nuanced phrase that's emerging in the science education and research realm. And we're still sort of formalizing the definition, but it is a phrase that we've chosen to use here at Click to Computer Science as we bring data literacy resources to out-of-school time. And though this is an area, a new formal area of STEM education, we think there's going to be big gains in a relatively short amount of time. So even though our schools are still trying to figure it out, so it's even newer to out of school time. So I'd like to take a few minutes and see where the group is at now. What does data literacy mean to you and your programming? What do you think data literacy is? I'd love to see some responses in the chat, and then I will give what I think the definition is, which is also open to updating.
Yeah, this is very much an emerging idea. So there is no right answer, I don't think, to this question yet.
If you're not quite sure what data literacy means, some other terms which may have very close definitions are things like data science, big data, data fluency, numerical literacy. So if you haven't used data literacy in your day-to-day or in your education, you could try defining one of those words instead. Absolutely, Sarah. Thanks for sharing. So Sarah's shared that skills and familiarity with reading and interpreting data, collecting data, applying it to the world around you, which are all absolutely pillars of data literacy. Becky has shared it's the way we use and understand information, thinking of big data sets, typically numerical. Rasha, data fluency is the ability. Oh, I love that one. The ability and confidence to actively make sense of and use of data. The ability is important, but so is our confidence surrounding it. Great. I think there's some awesome definitions here in the chat. When we use this term data literacy at Click to Computer Science, we're talking about 3 or 4 main things. But the first thing we're talking about is helping learners use and understand data. And so that was absolutely captured here in our chat discussion. And we're going to use a little bit of math as we do that. Math is my personal favorite specialty, but I know that a lot of people shy away from math, and that's okay. But I have great news for you. The data literacy as a field is not just about the math. So we can bring it into our skills and activities in a lot of ways. And beyond math, kids are going to use some critical thinking skills. We want to empower our young people around us to think about how the data is used in their lives and ask questions about data that they're exploring. So those are some non-math skills. And a lot of times we're also going to use technology skills too, right? Working with big data often requires computers or computational thinking because as we collect so much data around us, it very quickly becomes too large to deal with. So our formal definition right now is data literacy is the ability to read, write, understand, and communicate data in context. Which is great. I'm glad we have that under control, right? But what even is data? This is another word that we just hear batted about so frequently, but it's never really defined. So data for Click to Computer Science and really in general, data is going to be referring to any piece of information generated through observation or recording of facts, figures, or events. So these could absolutely be numbers, like Becky mentioned in the chat. She often thinks of large numerical data sets, which is absolutely true, but it could also be categorical or qualitative data, anything that can be observed. So data can be made of numbers or words or categories. So our goal in adding this data literacy component to Click to Computer Science site is to help support programs as they are supporting our youth in these 4 pillars. The first is engaging with data. We want to help youth ask questions that help make sense of data, understand the limitations of the data they're working with, and using their innate curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking as they engage with that data. The second pillar is how to visualize that data. So after we have this big list of numbers or this big list of words, how can we make any sense of it? So being able to create and use graphs and charts to understand data, to interpret what what they're looking at. We want them to have these technical skills and really computational thinking skills to visualize and interpret data, either by manually, like we could have a little creative art sesh, or with, there's a variety of computational tools available on the internet, which is very great for us because those are free, right? And a third component of data literacy at Click to Computer Science is understanding how data is being used, how data about us is being used, how about data about our community and peers are being used. In general, being able to use data and understand how data is used in the world around them is going to be an important part as they become contributing members, as they continue to grow in their role of becoming contributing members of society. And we really want to empower them to recognize how data can improve their world, but also how it can underlie some systemic inequalities, right? Data has been historically used to promote systemic inequalities, and we want to have an ethical component or a social emotional component where we are considering ethical ways to use data. And finally, communicating data. We want our youth to be able to tell a story with the data, to be able to share with others what their data is about, and we want them to have the technical and creative skills to tell a story with data. And the ethical skills to know when data is being manipulated to tell false stories. So now I ask you again, I'm looking forward to your feedback. What do you think of this approach? Are there pillars that we're missing? Are there still something we need to clarify? Later, we're going to have some concrete examples of how it might look in your programming. And I think that'll sort of help clarify what these 4 pillars are. But right now, we'd really, really love to get your questions. What do you still want to know about what data literacy means, or how we're seeking to incorporate it here at Click to Computer Science?
Your input is really important. So we'll just pause for a minute and give you some quiet time to think. You can type in the chat or unmute yourself and share your thoughts. One of the things I'd love to hear is if anybody's doing this now, do these pillars that are on the screen that Kimberly just talked about, is this what you are doing or would like to be doing?
Absolutely, Becky. I think we're all sort of exploring how these components fit into the out-of-school time spaces. It's great to be in an emerging field, though, don't you agree? Okay.
All right. I will
All right,
move on. Thanks.
I'm gonna kick it back over to Sandra to discuss the importance of data literacy in out-of-school time.
This is a little bit of a chance for me to talk about why we decided this is important. And I will say it is very important to me personally. I think this is really important in the lives of young people. So why we're doing it is, one, we live in a digital and data-driven world, and the young people growing up today, it's going to be even more so in their future. Data is already everywhere. It impacts every person in every part of our lives. Data impacts what videos kids see on TikTok, what information we hear as we're listening to the news, how our personal identities are protected or not protected in the world. So our goal in teaching about data literacy isn't really about creating data scientists, but really preparing every young person and empowering them to be successful in a data-rich world, which is where they're going to have to survive. We recognize that it's an area, data literacy is just emerging in the classroom. Some students are having opportunities to learn these skills, but not all. And there are 3 specific reasons why we think it's important that data literacy be included in out of school time, even as it is growing in the classroom. And the first is equity driven. Research makes it clear that low income and minority students are the ones who are most likely to be harmed in a data-rich society. Decisions that rely on big data sets and predictive algorithms like AI are likely to exclude or possibly even harm the interests of those who are not represented in the majority of the data sets. So really addressing this, particularly with students that might be harmed in a data-driven world, I think is important. And the second is about empowering youth. Data literacy, data knowledge skills are really going to help kids be successful in a data-rich society. It's going to help them be successful in daily living, but also give them opportunities in terms of jobs and careers. So we want young people to approach any challenge that they face in using data or possibly being harmed by it with confidence, because they know what data is and how it can be used. So it's about building their confidence, empowering them. And the third is about helping them be prepared for their future. Data literacy is going to be a life skill and a job skill in their future. And just like we encourage reading, physical activity, and building leadership or collaboration skills in out of school time, I think we're well positioned to help youth develop data literacy skills. Just like we may have some activities we do that support them in reading or being physically active and physically fit, we can use those same strategies, I think, with data literacy. And research on math and science learning has shown us that out of school time experiences have a significant impact on math and science achievement. And particularly for low income and minority students, they are critical to reducing any performance gap that exists in these areas. We don't know that that's going to be true for data literacy, but I suspect that that same thing is going to hold true, that the most impactful way to reduce gaps in performance around data literacy and data knowledge and skills is going to be really addressing those needs in out of school time. So we're going to pause one more time to get your input on, are you questioning whether this is something we should do? Because if you are, we'd really like to hear that. What we're going to do next is give a couple of examples. I think Becky said she'd really like to see what it could look like in out of school time. And we're going to share a couple of activities. But first, are you doing this? Are you trying to do data literacy? Are you interested in doing data literacy? Do you think it's not a good idea? We'd really like your input before we kind of go into those concrete examples.
Hi, I can share. My name is Russia, and so we and I'm from West Ed, and we work on both data literacy and out of school time learning, but in different contexts. So I guess I'm just bringing in my experience in both contexts. I think from what I'm learning and working in out of school time learning, and it seems like you're also have extensive experience with this, is we get feedback from out of school time educators that if we get too much into that things might appear schoolish for them. And I worry that the vision that we share for data literacy here may appear somewhat schoolish, but so I look forward to seeing some of these examples. So it's that tension that I'm seeing about, like, if we really want to make it beyond, say, data collection and really get into those being, curious and skeptic and going through these different processes? How do we make it feasible in an out of school time setting where, there is just attendance issues and all of that sort? So I look forward to hearing from you all.
That's a great point. And as I look through the chat, it looks like people are doing some of this work. They're interested in doing this work.
I'll share just a little bit. So I had previously worked with folks studying citizen science, now more commonly called community science, with youth, and trying to move beyond the participation as data gathering. So I think what Rasha was just saying too, like that, like how do we move beyond that concept of data literacy being just data gathering, but to actually do something with that data in a meaningful way that is also, dare I say it, fun in out of school time space, so that it avoids that sliding into that sort of more school type of thing. So I guess this is mostly just echoing what Rasha said, but just that I know that there's some work being done in that space around community science challenges, for sure. I think we can break some stuff and make it better, though.
Wonderful.
So one of the strengths, as you all have mentioned and contributed in out of school time programming, is that we're not focusing on these lectures and lessons and schoolish. And I really appreciate that you brought that up, Rasha, because that will be important for us as we frame these, though they are lessons, right? We don't want the kids or the youth to think they are. So we're going to try and bring play and fun into this learning experience in out of school time. And our team has decided, or we think that these facets are going to be important in incorporating data literacy to out of school time as well. So at Click to Computer Science, you'll hear us referring to the 3 C's of data literacy: curiosity, critical thinking, and creativity. We want to help youth develop curiosity about data, which motivates students to look closely at the data, to ask questions, and to think about what might be possible, not only what's just currently happening. And we want to create experiences that encourage and support curiosity. Creativity is our hope is to help youth bridge that gap between data and the real world. So to analyze the data differently, communicate what it says in meaningful ways. And critical thinking is going to help students think about the information and data they encounter. So they're not going to accept it, hopefully, they're not going to accept it at face value, but we want our youth to challenge assumptions and understand how data can be used in both positive and negative ways. So we're going to talk through a couple of real live lesson examples that you could start using right now in your out of school time.
So I want to frame just briefly where these examples come from. We have some links to share in the chat, and when you get there, it may look a little confusing because the 2 examples that we're sharing for data literacy activities actually come from New Zealand. And that's just because as I've been searching, New Zealand is not the only place that has that is developing this sort of curriculum, but they are leading and integrating it in some different ways. And there's also some really great National Science Foundation funded projects that are specifically focusing on out of school time audiences. So I don't want to make it sound like there's not others, but just to frame, these come from New Zealand. That's why they may seem a little strange as you're clicking on through to the links. But the first activity I'm going to talk about is for those younger students that we talked about, or even preschool through early elementary. You could do this even with 4th or 5th graders, but I think it'd be a little bit different. And the activity is called collecting. Ideally, this activity starts with a nature walk and having students collect objects as they walk, like leaves, acorns, pine cones, twigs, or stones, so that when they come back to your program, they have a bunch of objects that they're going to use for the activity. I realize that that's not really going to work in every sort of out of school time program. And so the other option would be to gather some objects that students could put into a collection. You don't want anything that's particularly valuable, but things like buttons, manipulatives, you might be able to ask a math teacher if they've got some manipulatives you could borrow, blocks, small cars, whatever kind of makes sense in your programming. Even markers would work for this activity. You want to have a variety of objects, whether it's objects that students have gathered or objects that you're bringing into the program, and encourage your youth to be curious, and they're going to look through these gathered objects and find things for their collection. So their goal first is to select about 10 to 12 items from what was gathered or provided for their collection. And it's important that they have the opportunity to decide what is and what is not in their collection. So we want to have more than enough items so that they're actually having to make some selections about what they're going to include in their collection. We don't want them to be able to use everything that's been gathered. We want them to make some choices. Encourage them to use their critical thinking to decide what does and what does not belong in their collection. This really leans into the passion that a lot of young children have about collecting. When he was younger, my son collected everything. He had collections of Hot Wheel cars. Bouncy balls was one of his favorite collections. He also collected quarters and rocks and stuffed animals. So that's the sort of behavior we want to link into, that kids like to collect things. Then after they've gathered their objects, they've made decisions about what belongs in their own collection. The next step is to encourage them to think about their collection, to ask questions like, why did you pick these things for your collection? Why are these items alike? What else might fit with your collection? We're trying to prompt them to think about the attributes of these objects, what makes them fit together. And the reason we're doing this is related to one of the topics we discussed earlier, that we often think about data as being numerical, but this collection of objects is a data set. And that's how we want them to think about their objects, that it is a collection, but it is also a data set. Then the third part, after they've made their collection, they've thought about what is and is not in their collection, we're going to ask them to make a label for their collection. And what this looks like may vary depending on how old your students are. It may be using words, it may be more pictures, however you want them to think of some way to label and describe their collection to somebody else. This is helping them, again, think about what are the attributes of the things in their collection, and they're also giving them the opportunity to communicate about the data they've collected to somebody else. So the idea, going back to those 3 C's we talked about here, students have used their curiosity in gathering and selecting items. They have used their creativity in critical thinking, in labeling and describing their collection. And then they are communicating about their data through their labels. One way to kind of wrap this up, if you want to make it a bigger activity, would be to showcase their collection in some way, to give them a chance to talk to each other about what's in their collection, or even showcase collections with their labels at a family night. The idea is you're introducing those 3 C's of data literacy, you're engaging them with data, but doing it in a very hands-on way that really, we hope, is engaging and intriguing for young children. So there's one example. Kimberly, I'll let you explain the next one. You're still muted.
Thanks, Sandra. Sorry about that. Here is another example that I really like called catapults. This works a little bit, this works really well for older kids. And just like Sandra mentioned, this is another link to the New Zealand math sort of program. And so it's aligned to their level standards. This is geometry level 3, which is about 5th or 6th graders. So you can imagine 10 to 12-year-olds really enjoying this activity, but we've also seen some success in some older middle school kids too. So the idea of this activity is that you use these common objects, which are like rubber bands, popsicle sticks, and a spoon, and then something that flies. The actual example uses cotton balls, but they don't fly well. So I don't think you should use cotton balls. Ping pong balls work really nice. But that's something to determine, right? So this really should not be used as an engineering activity. It's going to work better if all of the students build really similar catapults following the same directions. And the important part of the activity is collecting data and sharing that data out. So it's about how catapults work, and deciding together how best to collect the data, comparing and contrasting different ways. So after they've built these catapults, you've worked through them with them. Now they all have similar catapults. You can start making decisions like, do you think we should have a line where the measurement starts? Which part of the catapult should be aligned to the measurement line? Will you measure how far the object goes? What about where it hits first? Or if after it lands and it keeps rolling, are you going to measure it later? Another idea could be to measure how close you could to some particular target your object lands, or how many shots for each catapult could we record. You could also compare catapulting different objects like little blocks or little ping pongs, right? So there aren't right answers to any of these questions. The point of asking them is to get the students to agree so that they're collecting similar data. So once similar data is collected, it gives them a chance to really practice their critical thinking skills, to think about what will happen and plan before they collect their data. Then after students collect the data, this is the more interesting part to me, is to create a representation, a graph of this data set for the whole group. You could use a dot plot. They're pretty easy to put together. And if you're in a screen-free environment, like I saw someone in the chat, which is amazing, you can use what is this word? A measuring stick as your x-axis, and you can use sticky notes for each of the data points. You could even color code them based on like what object was flying or whichever. And then as a team or even individually, you can look at the data and encourage some curiosity. What's the longest distance? What's the shortest distance? What's the range of your data? Do you see any patterns? And to encourage creativity, you can ask questions about how you might communicate what you've learned. What do you think this data tells us about building catapults? What does this tell us about the difference between two different objects we're catapulting? What could we change to improve them? And how could we explain this to someone else? So how could we explain this to someone else, I think, is really the most interesting question and builds a strong foundation of data literacy. It encourages students to go from this either list of distances or criterion that have been met into telling a story about the data. I'm reading some things in the chat. Oh, that's so awesome. You did catapults last week. You didn't have spoons. Yes, the spoons. Thanks for sharing that, Diana. I really appreciate that. So if we go back to our 3 C's of critical, or our 3 C's of data literacy. Yes. So we have curiosity here in this activity because the students, you're asking the students to what might happen if you change certain aspects, if you use a different object to catapult, or where the reference line should be for measuring. Critical thinking in trying to decide which one of those things is best, and creativity in how to share those out. So both of those examples we talked about today are screen free, and in my opinion, they don't really feel like lessons. They feel a lot more fun. Yeah, that's all I have to share about that.
Okay, I
Yes.
just did something and made my screen go crazy. Okay, I'm back.
There we go.
All right, now we're to the time where we really just wanted to hear more from you. This is another picture of those kids that I spent a day with doing filming. And I can really relate to what Rasha said about it's very easy to fall into making this feel like school. We've had to fight that a few times throughout the filming because it did feel a little bit school-like sometimes, but other times it was really fun, and they were amazingly engaged learners. They were fantastic. So look forward to those videos that we'll have in February. But the activities we chose really were ones that we felt fit into what already is happening in out of school time programs, but also builds data literacy skills. Now it's a different from like where we went with this filming. We were filming Data to the Rescue, which is a whole curriculum that focuses on data literacy specifically. So it's a little different than the sort of one-off activities that we presented here. But we think for an out of school time program, you're going to want both. You may have some extended experiences where you take a curriculum like Data to the Rescue and you spend a whole quarter exploring data literacy, but other times you're going to want to take just a fun activity like building catapults for Halloween and add a little bit of data literacy into that. And then I love that you are already doing this. You were thinking about measuring and collecting data as you were doing that activity. Even if it didn't work out quite the way you wanted, you were doing exactly what we think is going to be empowering to young people if we can bring more of it into out of school time. So where we're at now is we really want some input from you. As I said, we've already made the decision. This is going to be part of what is on the Click to Computer Science website. We're thinking right now, we're in the planning phases of what we're including on that website and how we're going to structure it. The 4 pillars that Kimberly shared and the 3 C's is kind of how we're thinking about framing how we talk about data literacy on the website. So we wanted to share that with you, and we want to hear, what do you think? What do you want from us? What sort of information would be most helpful for us to put on the website to empower what you're doing in your programs?
I have a couple of ideas. So the first thing, I'm really excited about all the work that that you're doing. So I'm really glad that I came to this webinar and just found this group of people. Some ideas that I have. So there is an amazing opportunity in out of school time learning that teachers don't need to necessarily, or out of school time educators don't need to necessarily align or commit to certain standards or follow a certain curriculum that they have to follow. So that flexibility offers us a great opportunity. And I think you're very well placed for that. I think where I'm noticing in what we're doing in data literacy in formal ed or in school learning is there is, I'm wondering if we can go back to that slide that has your 4 components. Yeah, so I think we're doing a lot with engaging with data. We're doing a lot with visualizing with data, but we're doing a lot less with communicating data and understanding data uses. So and making like making use of these 3 C's, like really practicing these 3 C's that you brought up, which I love. So if there are greater opportunities to communicate with data, to question data, and to really anchor your work in that first, when you were first explaining why data literacy and out of school time learning. So really anchoring it in equity and equity questions, that would be just an amazing way to move forward. And going back to, I think it might have been Becky who mentioned that she works on citizen science. So linking some of your work to some place-based learning where learners can look into, for example, parks in their neighborhood. Does it matter which neighborhood you're at and how many parks are there, or the number of trees, or like there are socioeconomic differences when it comes to access to these things. So really linking it to their environment. So I think there's so much opportunity in out of school time learning, and I'm really excited that you're working on this. And there's just a lot that you can do in those 2 components, understanding data uses and communicating data.
Thank you. Are there things that people are afraid of, or that you think maybe you're comfortable with it, but you think that as the field as a whole is going to have some fears that we need to address or confront? Because I think that's important also. I really like this concrete. These are some things we can start with. That's really helpful. Are there barriers that we need to keep in mind that make this harder in out of school time programming? Challenges? I'm anticipating kind of like when we first started talking about STEM and after school, and a lot of staff were not sure they understood enough about STEM to teach it. I think that that'll have an impact here too.
I appreciate that point, Diana. Is there a way you think we could add encouragement to, or I guess to take away the fear, maybe?
Hi. Yeah, hi. I think that, well, I mean, I do have a lot of young staff. I have a large group of kids. I have a number of young staff. And I am the one in charge of it, so I'm the one that produces, any curriculum. But then, I don't have like a long time to go through it with them and teach them how to do it. So I really need things that are already written up that are step by step. I mean, honestly, I used the catapult partly because it literally was a picture of the catapult, and I got it through probably your link online or something ages ago. And so I just pulled it out and I pulled all the materials together and put them in a box and like put the picture on top and said, this is what they're supposed to have. This is how it's supposed to look. And so one other person was willing to try it, but a lot of times it's just, you really need something fairly simple like that, like where it's like, it's a picture, There's obvious materials you're going to use. Things like that might make it a little better. And step-by-step things for staff that are not, they don't have to read over it ahead of time. More than just glancing so that they can do it, like, here, kids, we're going to do this together.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Diana, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I guess I should out myself slightly and say that I'm the lead on the Click to Engineering site, so I'm one of their colleagues. But one of the things we think about all the time with trying to reach staff is wondering if we should be making more videos that show how to do these things, if that would be even more effective than written versions. And I'm wondering, as somebody who is facing this problem, if that feels like something we could include, certainly around data literacy.
I do think that videos are probably super helpful. Like, I'll sit and look at videos. Now I'm going to have a bunch of staff who come in and they have a phone. Am I going to be able to share that with them on the phone? Am I going to be able to, like, sometimes, like, I have an account, I can't just pull everything up on my phone and say, here's my phone, watch these videos. They don't all have a computer. We don't have I have 10 or 15 minutes to kind of orient them to the day, sometimes a little longer than that, but not a lot. So
it could even be something as simple as like having a QR code that's attached to these videos that you could print out, and they could just quickly scan the code and watch the video themselves.
Something like that would be better. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful feedback. Appreciate it.
Okay.
I love that idea. And I really resonate with this idea that they don't have time to read ahead of time. They're going to have a very short time to prep and get started in the activity. And we need to think about how to communicate with them and not expect them to have an hour of prep time before they get up with the kids. I'm not sure I have the answer to that, but I have heard that more than once, that needs to be part of how we do this.
I would just say one issue is definitely, like, we're not paying every staff to, like, be here an hour beforehand to learn everything is part of the issue. And most people are not staffed well enough to have one person who's just going to do the programs while someone else is watching the children. Most people are watching the children and doing the programs. So you can't have one person dedicated unless it's me. And then I'm, supervising all the other staff and running the kids that I have within my group, plus trying to do all of the STEM things together.
And I know at least here in Nebraska, we have a lot of staff in our after-school programs post-COVID that are paraprofessionals during the day. So they don't have time to prep during the day because they're with kids during the day in the classroom as paras, and then they're coming into the after-school program. That's happening way more than it did before. We're just tight on staff. We're using staff wherever we can find them. Well, this is really helpful input to, we're glad that the activities resonated with you, that felt like we were on the right track, that's useful input, but also really appreciate this sort of critical discussion about what are the challenges that we're going to be facing, what are some issues that we're going to need to address in order to bring this into after school time. I do have kind of a final slide here to wrap things up, and I just had a few key points that I wanted to reiterate as we're moving away from our time together. So we think that data literacy, however we define it, this is the definition we're working on now, is going to be key for young people. So we're going to keep working on that definition, keep trying to understand what data literacy is going to look like in out of school time programs. We're not going to wait until we know exactly where this is going. We're going to just start and move and adapt as we go. We want to focus on providing access for all young people to develop data literacy skills. And we want to make sure that our work helps narrow achievement gaps, not broaden them. We sincerely believe that data literacy skills are going to help youth be successful. And we recognize that they are going to be living in a world that we may not even be able to envision right now, but we're confident that data is going to play a key role in defining how the world works for them as they grow and develop. And we want them to be able to use these skills both in their future work, but also in their daily life to make good decisions, to be empowered, and to understand how data is impacting them and how they see the world and how it's shaping the world around them. I really do want to thank you for your input today. You can scan the QR code, or Anne will put a link in the chat to take a brief survey about this, just to let us know if this was a useful hour of your time and any input you have on how we set up future webinars. But we really do appreciate your support and your input today to help us understand what is happening in the field, not just where we are here, but all across the country, and what would be really helpful to your work to move forward.